Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to talk about a topic, social progression, I believe is what it was quoted to me as. I don't actually know what it's really called, but social progression. Somebody came into the stream while I was drawing a couple days ago, and they asked me if I would talk about this. And actually, it's sort of a fascinating subject, something of a delicate subject, but a kind of a sociological sort of thing. Social progression is in media, basically when they introduce characters from like a minority background, in the hopes that having these kind of characters seen more frequently will make people develop broader stereotypes about people. And I say broader stereotypes because stereotypes actually, everybody uses stereotypes. You use them for all kinds of things. I mean, like when you meet people, you kind of have this framework in your head for how your interactions are going to go. So like if you meet a Jewish guy, you have a stereotype, you assume this Jewish guy won't eat pork. And actually you find that some people are they're not really all that, they're really not that adamant about stuff. So maybe you meet a Jewish guy and he goes, I really don't care about the pork thing, and he'll eat pork. But generally speaking, like I say, you use these stereotypes. That most Jewish people won't eat pork because their religion forbids it. So you wouldn't serve them pork at a dinner party, something like that. Stereotypes. They can be good or they can be bad, but everybody uses them. They're an essential part of human interaction. So social progression is kind of introducing minority characters or people that we would have really crummy stereotypes for, and then kind of portraying them in sort of a human way so that people get used to seeing like oh, here's a black character on television, and you see that they act kind of like everybody else, and you don't develop such a weird stereotype about this particular group. Really good examples from back kind of, you could say, somewhat during the affirmative action years. There were some really good examples of this and some really bad examples of this. Good examples that people like to cite are things like Family Matters with, Steve Urkel. Steve Urkel eventually took over that show. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or The Cosby Show, what have you. Because these shows, actually, they depicted an all-black cast. And they were like just nice. They were just like nice families. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had like a very well-to-do, very well-to-do family, and everybody in them was kind of likable, fun characters. It was just about like day-to-day issues, and so shows like this, there are actually some people who talk about racial equality, who feel like television shows like that were probably some of the best shows out there for helping reduce racism and make everybody feel more comfortable with each other in kind of a desegregated environment, because they depicted black families as being the same as white families and just dealing with the exact same family issues that everybody else deals with. There were a number of shows that also would depict kind of the more, there was sort of a more urban life, like dealing with poverty and whatnot. But those were not as, they're not as well liked because a lot of times they're not, I've talked a bit about negativity and positivity, and when you think about like poverty, depicting people in a life of poverty, if you've got a lot of shows and like if every show with a black family in it has them in poverty, then people who are watching these shows kind of eventually develop the stereotype that all black families live in poverty, and so Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, for example, was one that people really liked a lot because it had a kind of a positive image. Phil Banks was a judge. Carlton was like really dorky but well-meaning and cared about school a lot. Will Smith had a heart of gold, but he was also kind of cocky, sort of amusing. Ashley was like this really nice young girl, and she was very polite, and so so on and so forth. So that in the practical sense is what social progression is it's the appearance of minority characters and things like this. You see this a lot on Tumblr. It's gotten a little bit strange where you see people on Tumblr anymore, and they have kind of Tumblr and a lot of social media. It's just become a terrible breeding ground for like misinformation, where people are kind of more focused on loss and pessimism than they are on positive stuff. Social progression really is what you want to aim for most of the time, is to have a very positive image. And we get this actually still in media. We still do this a lot, where we have like video games, or we have shows, or any variety of things where you have somebody that, we have sort of a minority, a lesser seen group, and they get a bit of airtime, or they get a lot of airtime, and they're depicted as fairly upright or ordinary, otherwise just ordinary individuals. A good example that a lot of people like to cite would be Arcade Gannon in Fallout New Vegas. Arcade Gannon, he's a homosexual character, and he's not one of my favorite characters, to be honest, mostly because he got mad it was mostly because he will leave. He had principles, and if you upset his principles, he would leave. And as a follower, that irritated me. He wasn't the only one who did that. But I remember I think that he would talk back to you about it, I think is what it was, is why I didn't like. Because the first time I ever played with Arcade Ganon, I was trying to do a Legion run. I'd never done a Legion run before because the Legion is such a, like, laughably evil faction. And so every time I did something good for the Legion, like, Arcade Ganon would get on my case about it, and I'd be like, Arcade Ganon, you agreed to come with me. You are gonna leave. Okay. Well, fine. Yeah. But anyway, though. So Arcade Ganon, though, his character is actually... He's like a guy who is gay, rather than being a... There's ways that you could write characters. You could write a character, and you could say, Arcade Ganon is gay. Also, like a doctor or some crap. But actually, it's more like, Arcade Ganon is a doctor. Also, he is gay or some crap. And you don't really find out about his sexuality unless you kind of poke into his life, and he admits that he has boyfriends. Or if you play a character who is gay or bisexual, then you can, like, flirt with Ganon. And that's how you know that he's gay. Veronica from the same game is also the same way, but she's a lesbian. She's got a girlfriend named Christine, and unless you really get into it, or unless you play a character who is a lesbian, it really doesn't come up. Like, they don't flirt with you, they don't mess with you. They're focused on other things, like they're focused on their duties to the Brotherhood of Steel. So stuff like that, you've just got these characters that are just kind of casually this other thing, but they've built up a whole framework around being who they are. They are like Veronica is a lesbian, but primarily she's a member of the Brotherhood of Steel. This is where she has the most duties. She doesn't really have any duties to being a lesbian. I mean, there's this, aside from her girlfriend who ran off and got trapped in the Sierra Madre, there's really nothing. It's really not part of her story so much. I'm not even sure if you can date her as the main character. I think you can maybe you can just flirt with her. Yeah. But anyway, though, so you see this in games. You have characters that do this. You also, you get to... more frequently, you see gay characters probably played for laughs, though. This can be good or bad. It kind of depends on how they use it. I've seen, because what you see a lot of what you call the rake. And a rake, when you're speaking in romance, this is like normally a person who kind of flirts with everybody in the hope that they'll just drag in, like they just throw a rake out and they just try to drag in as much as they can, and whatever they pull in, perfect, I got somebody, so a rake, you're just kind of like raking for people. And so they use the gay rake. I see this very commonly in a lot of different types of media, actually. I remember Outlaw Star, well, Gene Starwind was a rake, actually. The main character of Outlaw Star, Gene Starwind, was a rake. He flirted with each and every girl, but he had a friend named Fred Lowe, who was a gay guy. But Fred might have been a rake, but he came on really strong to Gene all the time. Except for Fred was kind of a fun character because he was also a savvy businessman. And so he would hit on Gene, and he'd be like, hey, Gene, oh, my favorite guy. And I remember one of the bodyguards like threatened Gene, and they're like, he goes, I hope that you return the master's affections, because if you break his heart, we will drag you outside and we will beat you senseless. So Fred Lowe was kind of funny. Fred Lowe, he was like in love with Gene, and so he could be persuaded to like give Gene a loan, but then like he would still kind of loan shark the loans, so Gene would still be like buried in debt to Fred, because Fred was a businessman. He was like a really prominent business leader. So that was kind of a fun character. But yes, but very commonly, though, you see the rake. I had Shadow Hearts is one of my favorite games that I play, and that game had a lot of fan service. There was a lot of innuendo humor and a bit of sex humor in that game, and one of the characters was gay. He was the acupuncturist, and every time you stumbled into him, he would flirt with your male characters, or it was implied that he fondled them during the acupuncture series, during the acupuncture. Acupuncture had a valuable... It was valuable, so you pretty much you had to go through it. But the only person you could go through it was with this lecherous old guy. Yes. The girls thought he was very sweet in the game. But anyway, though, so you see some varieties of this. You really don't have to do any one specific thing. I mean, like not every black family on television has to be Will Smith's family. you know, you get different varieties, and the more variety you see, the more broad people's interpretation of things go. Because you do get people, like you get people come from different walks of life, and their walk of life really affects how they behave more than, you know, their skin color or their sexual orientation or anything like that. And that's really the most important thing that you need to drive home. That's the best thing about if socially progressive media is done correctly, then all it really does is it just kind of demonstrates that people are different depending on where they're from, or what their situations are, or what are their career choices. You know, what do they know? What are their perspectives in life? But on Tumblr, though, one thing that's, like I say, has gotten strange is social media has started to develop sort of an adversarial take on this whole thing. It's normally seen as very positive, but we've gotten to where like Tumblr now spreads a lot of Tumblr and Facebook too. I've seen this posted on Facebook, just any kind of social media really. They spread a lot of just very negative, pessimistic disinformation about stuff, and it gets so bad sometimes that I can't tell one group of racists from another. Like when you've got a bunch of people, they're like, I'm socially progressive, and everyone's race puts them into a specific tier of worth, and we have to respect these various tiers of value. They call it like, this is privilege theory, where like I don't know what exactly the tiers are, but it's all just insanity anyway. It's really terrible. It's really racist. It's this idea that like if you're like Hawaiian, then you're on a lower tier than like Native Americans, and Native Americans are lower than you, and the lower you are on the tiers, then like the more important your opinions are, or something to that effect. And so like if you're transgender, you're somewhere in the tiers, and they're kind of fuzzy. They're kind of fuzzy about it. I think they argue a lot about who's on the worst tiers and who has like who has the most important opinions. But I remember a friend. I've been critical of Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm critical of like a lot of these activists anymore that are just so negative and just hell-bent on spreading negativity. Anita Sarkeesian is one of them. She tends not to be very positive, ever. I mean, like, everything she always talks about, it's always like, this is wrong, and I don't like this, and I don't like this. And what I feel like these people are doing is they're not they say that they're raising awareness, but what they're doing is they're raising awareness of the fact that they are like miserable. You know, this is kind of my take on it. Is it feels like they're just trying to spread around misery, because look at what Anita Sarkeesian has done so far. Regardless of whether or not you think that her points have values, the controversies that she's created, it feels like the divisions between people have gotten wider. Like before Gamergate. I would not have thought that there was all that much of a division between girl gamers and male gamers. I mean, like, I had female friends that played games. They played what you might call dude bro games. I mean, like, one of my friends just like absolutely loved first-person shooters. She has very strong opinions about this take on those games as dude bro games, by the way. She didn't like that at all. But I just feel like now, like, post-Gamergate, suddenly there's just, like, this wide division where they want you to think about, you know, like, every time you see a woman game, like, think of her as being a completely separate entity than the male gamers. And so you start to just get this division where they're, instead of being socially progressive, they're being socially regressive. Instead of presenting women as part of the group and part of the community and you know, individuals, but still like gamers, like, you know, like women are involved in gaming, their game, like, you know, developers getting involved in them. Like you could say, like, you know, we've got developers that have been pretty influential and have done a lot of really positive things. And if you look at them, like Amy Hennig, like I said, we've talked about, Amy Hennig was responsible for Legacy of Kain. Look at what she brought to gaming. People loved Legacy of Kain. You know, there's positivity to be shown there. So like Amy Hennig, you know, Amy Hennig is a game dev. She's in the gaming industry. You know, you could say she's a gamer. She's part of our community. She's part of our gaming community. Stuff like that. This is positive. You know, we're happy to see these people. I don't think it's progressive to suddenly stop and say, wait, but let's not think of Amy Hennig as a gamer. Let's think of her as a specific subset of gaming that is separate from the male gamers who dominate this, and who dominate that. Socially regressive. It's taken everything that socially progressive agendas is supposed to do, and it turns it on its head. It's actually doing the reverse, I suspect. Like it's not forging a path forward. It's not bringing us together. It's drawing us apart. I saw this again. Like Arthur Chu is somebody, he's a Jeopardy star. Like, this is his claim to fame. This is one of these things that's weird, is it's like you don't really have to be, I don't know, like, I don't know why Arthur Chu suddenly got to be like a big name in this, but I remember somebody posted something that he said on Facebook during the Ferguson stuff, and like, Ferguson is a touchy issue. I understand enough about police work, and I understand the whole thing well enough that I don't really want to weigh in on Ferguson whatsoever, but somebody, an old high school friend of mine, reposted something that Arthur Chu said. Basically, what had happened is they'd been saying Black Lives Matter, and then I think some well-meaning people said, wait a minute, you know, like that's sort of like isolating all lives matter, you know? Like, black people are part of the community matters, you know? Like, think about like Hispanic, you know, white, you know, like anyone that you can think of, Middle Eastern, all lives matter, you know? We're all part of a big community, you know, it's our country, we're a big cultural mixing pot, all lives matter. And Arthur Chu just gets irate. And he's like, how dare you? Like, how dare you? Like, this is like if you went to a funeral and you found the family whose child had died and you said, I too have experienced loss. I am there for you. I express solidarity. What a dick you would be to go to a funeral. It was like Arthur was, I get the impression that he's like maybe kind of antisocial. And maybe he doesn't understand, like, I read that post and maybe he didn't like understand what a funeral is for. Part of it is to respect the death of a loved one, but also it's to be there for the family and to say that, yes, you know, I too have experienced such loss, and I'm there for you, I know what this is like, and, you know, you're supposed to be providing support to the family that has lost a loved one. So going to a funeral and saying, you know, like, I too have experienced loss, is a sign of solidarity. It's like saying we're all in a community, we're in this together, I understand you. But he was irate about that. He was like, it's a black problem. This is Arthur Chu. It's a black problem. And I know so many people. I mean, like, I know some old women who would have gotten angry. I think one of the lunch ladies at my middle school cafeteria, she was an old black lady. I remember her ranting on this one. She had really strong opinions on racism. I feel like this is one of these things she would have ranted on. Stuff like that, like social tragedies or problems where your community falls apart. Like Ferguson, as a community struggling, this is not a black problem. This is a community problem. This is a community thing. You shouldn't be thinking of people in terms of their race. You should be thinking of them in terms of people, part of your group. And like, oh my God, like, how do we fix our group? How do we make our group better? Not like, how do we make black people better? It's how do we make us better? How do we all become better? This is why, too, I think that when you get into stuff like, what could we do? Well, it's like, well, fix education, you know, fix healthcare, because you're providing advantages to the whole group. You're looking out for the whole community, and you think in terms of the whole group or the whole community. I mean, like, not to undermine the fact that racism is still out there, but the more that I don't know, just like I say, I just feel like it's very backwards to spread around so much pessimism and so much negativity. You should want to think of everyone as being part of your own group, as being part of your own community, as being individuals with perspectives based on where they came from, and not based on their skin color. It's strange the way that the politics have formed a horseshoe. I remember somebody talked about this once while I was talking about political polarization, where you find the extreme far-right neo-Nazis sound very similar to the extreme far-left ideologues, because they both kind of believe in the same things. The far-right neo-Nazis believe that everyone should be divided according to their race, and that everyone should be, a lot of times nowadays you hear them say, like, everyone should be equal, but they should be respected based on their separate race. We need to keep everyone separate, you know, separate but equal. And then you find that these really far-left ideologues are basically saying the same thing, but they just believe it's like everyone should be regarded separately based on their race, but I just want everyone, like, I want equality, and everyone to be regarded separately and not like all part of the same group. And yeah, I mean, like, I've seen diatribes where the person doing the talking would go on all this racist crap about how, like, the races are like, they need to be separate and they need to be looked at separately. And I've been on 4chan. I've been on other social media sites. I've seen it all. And if somebody doesn't come up and they just say these, it's gotten so bad that if somebody doesn't come up and just say these days that my racist opinions are on the left or my racist opinions are on the right, I sometimes can't tell whether they're neo-Nazis or whether or not they're part of what we're now calling the social justice warrior set. It's gotten that bad. So yeah, so social progression though too. You see some of those people, they complain. They say there's no black people in media. I see this every now and then, and this is actually untrue. The best thing that can happen actually with social progression is that you don't even notice it. Like you see Korra, Last Airbender, or you see the Last Airbender, and you know that whole show featured Katara and her brother Sokka, and they were like dark skinned, maybe based on Inuit culture or somewhat. They were like dark-skinned characters, and they just hung out with Aang, and they were like fun, lovable. Their race really never came up. I mean, their nationality was important to the story, but their race, their skin color wasn't really a thing. You know, everybody was happy, more or less. You know, that's social progressive. That's socially progressive, because you see people from different skin color or what have you, and the skin color has no impact on the characters. They're wonderful, exciting, fun characters, completely regardless of their skin color. I mean, Korra too, like Korra, dark skin heroine. You know, she was, you know, her skin color really had nothing to do with her character. Number 5 in Kids Next Door. Same way, this is a great example of social progression in media. Was like number 5 in Kids Next Door. She was a little black girl, but her race really never came up. Her sister Cree was one of the main villains, and she was evil just because she was a teenager. She was angst-filled. Her dad was Bill Cosby, which always cracked me up. He was also a doctor. He was Dr. Bill Cosby. Yeah, so stuff like that though. Like the race doesn't really come up. But they're still like heroes, and they're still very distinct characters, and they're a lot of fun. And this comes to such a fact that when you're watching the shows, you don't think about them being a different race. You think about number 5. Number 5 is part of the Kids Next Door. That's who you identify her as. Her sister Cree is part of whatever Cree was part of, the teenager. She was a teenager. This is, you know, you thought of the groups that they belonged to or their personal backgrounds. You didn't think about their skin color. The skin color didn't define the characters. Susie from Rugrats was another one. Was Susie came over, and she was always she was like the smart girl between her and Angelica. Like Angelica was horrible, and she lorded her superior age over the Rugrats. But Susie would come over, and she was very nice, and she would just tell them about like this or that. And again, a character like she was a little black girl, and skin color totally irrelevant. You wouldn't think of it. And that's how it works. That's how you do a positive character. That's if you personally want to have, you know, like so I was talking about this once online. I was on and some people were talking about questionable content, and apparently there was some arc where the character like slept with a transgender person, and this was like the point of the arc, I guess. Like I don't really read questionable questionable content. But I was just chatting with someone, and they kind of explained to me. So this is secondhand. I might be mistaken. But just to take it as an example, as a sort of thought experiment, maybe in case I'm wrong. Basically, what the story was is somebody explained that the story was actually really bland because the transgender character was completely non-controversial. Like there was no real conflict about it. The character was like, "Hey, I'm transgender, just so you know," and then everyone was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then later they were like, "So let's date." And then they were like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then they were like, "Let's have sex." And they were like, "Oh, okay, cool." And the whole point of the character was kind of just to do this. And it was sort of like, this is like, I'm the transgender one. And so they said it was sort of dull, and they felt like it really wasn't a very good way to do things because there was no conflict. There was no story. And this is kind of actually what I think a lot of people are afraid of when you get into media today, when they hear about Anita Sarkeesian harping on, oh, we need more of this, we need more of that. I think that people are afraid that we'll wind up with this just very bland, we'll just wind up with these very bland cornflake characters, you know, like just, here's a woman. She's in this to be a woman, and her character is that she's a woman, because Anita Sarkeesian was angry. And, you know, that would just suck. This would be like boring characters. So that was what they explained to me, is they were like, yeah, I mean, questionable content is boring like that. They just have, like, this is a transgendered person. They're transgendered. The character is that they're transgendered. I don't know. You know, and so I was like, why don't we? What if you made it to where like she rode motorcycles, and the main character was afraid to ride motorcycles, and she taught him how to ride a motorcycle, and so there was a little bit of fear and anxiety, and there would be like some growth between the two of them, and you'd have like a conflict, and the character overcoming his fear, and they were like, yeah, that would be great if questionable content wrote stories like that, then, you know, it'd be a great arc. But as it was like cornflakes without sugar, without any sweetener, cornflake story, cornflake character. Yeah, cornflake characters are not really a very good example of social progression. Another good example of a cornflake character would be like Apache Chief in the Super Friends, if you guys remember the old Super Friends show. Apache Chief. Sean Baby did an article about Super Friends. Sean Baby is he's a comedian online, but he talked about how like Apache Chief's power was that he was neither an Apache nor a chief, but he called himself Apache Chief anyway, and he would just talk incessantly about the Native American ways, and he was just kind of like this really almost just comically stupid caricature of Native Americans, and the whole point of his character was like, I am the Native American superhero. And so a lot of people found him very offensive because he was just this stupid cornflake, you know, character. He just showed up, I'm the flaky Native American. Like, does anyone want to see a Native American on television? Here I am. No, I don't do anything, but I'm on the TV. So you got that. I think Black Vulcan was the same way, and I actually read that Black Vulcan was supposed to be another character originally. It was a black superhero from another comic, but the writer who was doing it was so offended by the proposal. He was like, you want my character to just be in your show, to just stand around and be black? And I guess they were like, yeah, that's about the size of it, you know, we're trying to be more progressive. And he told them he's just like, you guys can just sit on go to hell. He didn't want anything to do with it, so he told them, no, you can't have my character. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was like Static Shock or something like that, but now I can't remember who it was. Or maybe it was like Black Lightning or something. It was another character. Black Vulcan was supposed to be a completely different character. Excuse me. He was supposed to be a different character, and the guy who wrote for him just wouldn't have it. So cornflake characters never very popular. Cornflake characters aren't really good. They don't really help. They don't make a good story, for one thing. They're not likable, and a lot of times they just make a new stupider stereotype. And this is another thing that's kind of funny. About the social progression that you're seeing on social media, where you get people who are trying to create new stereotypes and saying that everyone should fit into them, and they're really not like better than the old stereotypes. They're just different stereotypes, and it just doesn't help. Social progression in media, when done well, is when you have a character and they are an interesting and dynamic personality, and they are part of the story, so that if you're really not paying attention, then you probably barely even notice that they're a separate race from you. I think Juniper Lee would be another good example. Juniper Lee, the whole story was about Juniper Lee, and I believe they brought up some of her cultural stuff. I mean, that's okay. It was part of her background. Dora the Explorer is the same way. Dora the Explorer, little Mexican girl, goes on adventures. Her skin color is really not much of a deal. She speaks a lot of Spanish. But yeah, you know, just like, here's a little, I guess she's Mexican. I don't know, actually. I don't think they ever say. I don't think they say where Dora's from. She may not be from Earth. Dora might be a space alien. Would explain a lot. But anyway, though, yeah. So that's the way that it's done right. The way that Tumblr constantly rants on stuff, or the way you see Tumblr people rant on stuff, or the stuff that you see Arthur Chu say. That's just racist. That's just racist crap. Those people don't know what they're talking about. They're just hurting people. They're regressive. Those are socially regressive people. And like I say, I feel like Anita Sarkeesian is socially regressive. Anyone who's spreading fear, paranoia, anxiety, who's trying to widen divisions between people, who's trying to create clear good guys and clear bad guys, those are socially regressive people. You don't want to create those divisions. You never want divisions. You always want people to just think of one another as people. This is the best possible thing. When you hear somebody is gay and you just think, that doesn't tell me anything. Like, when you get to that point, when you have people thinking in those terms, when you hear somebody is black, when you hear they're gay, when you hear they're like Spanish, you know, if you hear anything about them that doesn't really describe their personality, and you just say, "Oh, that tells me nothing," that's the objective of social progressivism, if done correctly, is that you just think it tells you nothing. Because truthfully, it doesn't. It tells you nothing. You know, there's your race, your creed, your sexuality, your gender. Doesn't define much about your life. So, you know. Anyway. Yeah. So that's the topic. It is kind of interesting to talk about. There's a lot of examples in it. Many of us don't realize how much of it is actually out there. A lot of people are sort of complaining that it doesn't exist, and then they sort of have which confirmation bias. They have this sort of confirmation bias where they'll just be like, this doesn't exist, there's no social progression in media, and then you'll be like, well, what, you know, like Juniper Lee and Susie and Rugrats and Number 5 and Cora, and then they'll be like, oh, there's notable exceptions, and you're like, what are you? What a notable exception. You just didn't think about it because you just had your confirmation bias. You were looking for bad examples so you could complain. Look for positive examples. Look for happy things. Encourage people. Make them feel good about going into things, you know. So your race doesn't matter. Go apply for whatever. Follow your dreams. Just follow your dreams. Whoever you are, go out and do the things. You want to be in game? You want to be in gaming? Do you like games? Are you a woman? You like to be in games? Go join games. There's a lot of really good gamers. I believe that I think that StarCraft actually has some professional females. Not a lot of them, but they're out there. They're at the top of the games. They've got some really good female game developers that are doing well. I don't believe that they're discriminated against at all in the degree that some pundits are saying that they are. And in any case, they made some really fantastic games that are really well appreciated. I mean, you could be the next Amy Hennig, and I'm sure a lot of us would love to have another Amy Hennig. So if you think you've got the chops to make a game like Legacy of Kain, go out and do it, because we'd all love to have another version of that. I mean, hey, positivity is always better than negativity. But anyway, I suppose that'll be it for today. So I will catch you guys later.